When you think of giant sandworms, two movies come to mind: Dune and Beetlejuice. Now, I know everything about Beetlejuice, but quite honestly, the only thing I know about Dune is the fact that it has giant sandworms. But quite honestly, the only thing I know about Dune is the fact it has giant sandworms. Sorry. So here we go with the remake. This is 2021's Dune. Spoiler alert, while I might be giving you my opinion on the film, that's no substitute for watching it for yourself. Links to the film are in the description. We start by listening to some sort of alien speaking in a different language. I'm not going to lie, that definitely got my attention. If you weren't really ready to pay attention, you definitely are now. Giant machines trudge through the sands as they harvest spice, and we spot native dwellers getting ready to defend their homeworld. Chani prepares to lead her people against the newcomers, and Glossu looks at the potential fortune he could mine from this planet. Glossu's army rains down hellfire, but after years of turmoil, they suddenly leave the planet in peace. After some time, we meet Paul as he wakes up in the year 10,191 on his homeworld, Caladan. At breakfast, his mother, Lady Jessica, tells him of an upcoming ceremony that he has to get ready for, and she has him practice his voice. Paul tries to practice this power of the voice, and he commands his mother to give him a glass of water. He almost succeeds, but she knows that he's tired because of dreams he's having of Chani. I don't care about any of the ceremony or spice on the world, but I do want to learn how to use that voice power. Do you imagine what you could do with that power? I know half of you are thinking something dirty, the other 49% are thinking you'd rule the world, and the 1% would actually do something good. I've seen the comments. After Paul studies about the natives on the sand planet, he joins his mother and father, Duke Leto, for a welcoming ceremony. The messenger approaches and announces that the Emperor has called upon his house to be steward of the planet. After the ceremony, Paul goes to visit the warrior Duncan about taking him on his journey to the planet. Duncan refuses because he likes his job and life, but Paul tells him about the dreams he's been having about Duncan and the Fremen people. He knows about how he sees him die in his dream, and Duncan assures him that it was just a dream. Paul goes to speak with his father about joining Duncan, but Leto tells him that he needs him by his side. Leto talks to Paul about his plan to have Duncan set up a peace talk with the Fremen, and he explains how this will set up a war with the previous family to steward the planet. For a movie that I thought was just a giant desert with giant worms, there sure is a lot of politics in this. I might actually like this even more than I thought. Paul goes to weapons training with Gurney, who tries to give him life lessons at the same time. Then we see Giedi Prime, the homeworld of the Harkonnens, the previous stewards of the sand planet Arrakis. Here we see that Glossu is meeting with Lord Baron to give him an update on the situation. Glossu isn't too happy that the planet was taken from them, but Lord Baron assures him that this is all part of the plan. Back on Caladan, chanting visitors arrive on the rainy night, and Lady Jessica wakes up Paul. She has him get dressed and follow her to meet her old teacher, but the doctor gives him a warning that the Fellowship of Sisters has their own agenda. The Reverend Mother uses the voice on Paul to make him approach her, then she has him put his own hand in a box of pain. All he has to do to pass the test is keep his hand in the box. As he endures the pain, flashes of his dreams seem to empower him, but he passes the test. After the Reverend Mother calls Lady Jessica back in, she asks about the dreams. Paul tells them about Chani, and with that, she departs. On the way back to her ship, Reverend Mother shuns Jessica for having a boy, and for teaching him the way. But Jessica thinks that Paul may be the chosen one. They tell her that they've set up a path for Paul on Arrakis, and it's up to him to do with it as he sees fit. Soon, Paul and the rest of the Caladan planet travel to Arrakis. Once they land, the Fremen point at them and chant a name over and over. When Paul and Lady Jessica go to a ship to get to the city, Jessica explains what the people were chanting means Messiah. When they get to the city, they find out that the shield wall protects the city from weather and the worms. Do you know how excited I was to hear someone else mention worms here? It was like that Leto DiCaprio meme all over again. Once at the capital, Lady Jessica goes to choose a handmaiden, and she finds one that's concealing a weapon. After confronting her, the woman shows her a special blade that's meant for the mother and son, the chosen Messiah. Outside, Paul walks the grounds, and he meets the gardener who tells them of the sacred palm trees. Then he learns about the sandworms. He finds out that the Fremen use an arrhythmic step to traverse the desert. Just then, a weird little mechanical bug burns its way into his room. After Paul dismantles it, they find out that there was a Harkonnen spy planted behind a wall weeks before they arrived that was controlling it. Then we see Reverend Mother speaking with Lord Baron, and she barters for the lives of Lady Jessica and Paul. After she leaves, Lord Baron tells his hand that none of the family will live though. After he talks about his desert and his dune, he rises like a weird space worm himself. Back on Arrakis, Paul joins his father on his council, and they find out that the Harkonnens sabotaged the equipment that they left for them to use. Paul asks about who the Emperor appointed as the transition leader, and they decide to set up a trip to the fields with the man. Meanwhile, Paul greets Duncan as he returns from his time with the Fremen. Duncan addresses Duke Leto about the leader that he's brought with him. After finding out that there are millions of Fremen on the planet, after realizing that him spitting at their feet isn't an insult, but a way to show that you are worth the gift of moisture, they try to come to terms. Stilgar wants them to mine their spice and come back behind their walls, but Leto can't promise that they'll never have to go in the desert. After realizing that that's about all the negotiating that will take place, he goes to leave, but not before telling Paul that he recognizes him in his language. Alright, creepy Sandman, how about you don't go whispering sweet nothings in a language I can't understand? Where's Lady Jessica? She knows all these languages. She should be at every meeting with the Fremen. Later, Paul goes to visit Duncan, and he sees some of the tools that the Fremen have designed. After some time, Leto and Paul go to meet with the transition ecologist, Dr. Leet. She provides them with still suits, and she's impressed to see Paul's put on the same style as the Fremen. This just adds to the prophecy everyone talks about. After checking the suits, they head to one of the harvesters. When they get higher in the sky, they end up seeing a trail of sand headed their way. Sandworm! That's a freaking sandworm coming! Don't mind me, I'm just way too excited about a worm. Dr. Leet radios to the harvester that a worm's on its way, and they have a ship come out to pick it up until the worm passes by. The ship arrives and tries to anchor onto the harvester, but one of the anchors doesn't attach. When they realize that the crew is going to have to evacuate, Duke Leto takes his ships down to help evacuate the crew. Paul steps out onto the sand, and he tries to direct the men. Suddenly, the spice gets into his system, and he hears another voice. The ships are ready to leave, but Gurney realizes that Paul is speaking riddles at the harvester. When they go to run back to the ship, the worm appears and eats the harvester. Okay, so all we saw was the mouth, but that was big enough to eat half the city. I would never go back out in the desert. I wouldn't even trust the city walls. How long have the Fremen been living underground with this thing? Back at the city, Paul tells his mother about a vision he had at the harvester of Chani killing him. But he knows that a special blade is important. He also knows that Lady Jessica is pregnant. She goes to Leto to tell him about Paul, but he decides that he'd rather not know. All he wants is to know that he's going to be protected no matter the outcome of this endeavor. That night, someone infiltrates the city, and the doctor shoots Leto with a poison dart. Meanwhile, Gurney wakes up to find that they're under attack. He gets what ships he can in the air, but it isn't much. So they prepare for a fight on the ground. While Gurney is busy holding them back on one front, the capital gets stormed from the other direction. Back inside, the doctor apologizes to Leto and tells him that Lord Baron has his wife. He replaces one of Leto's teeth with a poison tooth so he can kill the Baron too. These are some realistic alliances going on. The doctor's going to do what he can to save his wife, but he gives Leto the chance to end the Baron. On top of that, he agrees to do what he can for Paul. It's one of those moments where his wife comes first, but there's no need for complete betrayal. Nice. Lady Jessica and Paul are taken away on a ship, and Duncan takes a ship to follow after them. Paul tries to use the voice on them, but it only works after a few tries. Lady Jessica, on the other hand, literally has all the guards take care of themselves. The mother and son run up a nearby dune to watch as the city continues to go up in flames. Back at the capital, Duke Leto wakes up to find Lord Baron eating at the other end of the table, and he addresses him as cousin. When the doctor comes in to get his wife, Lord Baron floats over to him and kills the doctor. Who didn't see that one coming though? That one was definitely coming. But Leto literally drops the entire room after breathing out the poison. Whatever that poison is, it needs to be banned forever. Dr. Leet looks out over the dunes until she sees a lone ship approaching. Duncan comes out, but Leet still won't admit to anything. Meanwhile, some of Lord Baron's subjects come into the death room, and they find him barely breathing up near the roof. While Paul breathes in the spice, he hallucinates about Chani watching him fight on the dunes. As the vision continues, he sees Chani and himself looking down on his home planet, and he warns Lady Jessica of a holy war coming. She tries to comfort him, but he ends up using the voice in rage towards her because of how she made him a freak. Lady Jessica realizes that a lot of this is just the emotions of a boy mourning his dead father, but there's something to take from all of these visions. After some rest, a beep is heard from a device in the pack, and he has her drink some water. This water's recycled from the tent, so pee. You mean to tell me that they're just sitting in a tent that's collecting their own pee? He tries to say that it's sweat and tears, but they've been buried under the sand. It's pee. Once they get out, Duncan finds them and addresses Paul as his Duke. As they fly away, Dr. Leet is on board and tries to help them rehydrate. She leads them to an old testing station so that they can seek shelter from the oncoming storm. They use everyone's spit to make coffee. I know it's the hottest desert, but do we need coffee that badly? Paul tries to convince Leet to testify against the Emperor, but his only playing card is that the Fremen think he's a messiah. Just then, men show up that storm the facility, but they're met by a small, fierce resistance. Part of that resistance is Duncan, who sacrifices himself to protect Paul. I'm sorry, but that's Aquaman and Khal Drogo? He can easily take about 10 of them before going down. And it turns out that I was almost right. I think it was about 8 people, but then he gets up, takes out the sword in his chest, and kills all but a few of them. Good enough for me. Leet helps Jessica and Paul escape, and she goes the other way to make it to a nearby settlement. Before she leaves, she notices that one of the sandworms is making its way to the facility. Jessica and Paul make it to the Thopter. That's right, the ship that flies like a dragonfly is called a Thopter. I don't know how I feel about that name choice, but it flies, so who cares? Leet goes to stand against the worm, but she gets stabbed by the soldiers. Before they can finish the job, she beats on the sand to attract the worm, and they get eaten by the monstrous creature. Meanwhile, Glossu goes to visit Lord Baron to tell him the news of chasing Paul into a sandstorm, and the Baron commands him to squeeze the income out of the planet and kill the Fremen. Paul and his mother make it out of the sandstorm, and they crash land in the middle of the desert. They immediately change into their suits, and they head out to find the Fremen. After a vision tells Paul to follow a friend, Jameis appears to guide him. They spot the location they're headed for, and when night falls, they sandwalk through worm territory. They end up setting off the wrong beats with their footsteps, and the worm hurries towards them. Just before the worm gets them, it emerges from the sand and seems to look at Paul. After the worm seems to speak to him, Paul figures out that someone set off a thumper machine to draw it away. After it leaves, they find out that they're not alone, and Stilgar calls out to them. After the Fremen decide that Lady Jessica has no place with them, they prepare to fight, and soon they win favor. Finally, Paul meets Chani, but it's anything but a romantic meeting. Before they leave, Jameis decides to challenge Jessica, but Paul fights in her stead. This whole fight scene feels very real and tactical. There's no soundtrack and every hit seems to be on beat. We need more like this. Paul wins after he kills Jameis, and Stilgar accepts him as one of their own. Jessica tries to barter for a way off-world, but Paul knows that his place is here. He travels with Chani and the others, but then he spots a worm rider. Chani assures him that this is only the beginning, and Paul smiles as he follows. Then the credits roll. This was fantastic. I can't give it a solid comparison to the classic Dune, but this one is absolutely thrilling to watch from start to finish. Give it a shot. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this one. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.